And welcome to AA Beyond Belief, a podcast for, by, and about people who have found a secular path to recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm here with my co-host, Angela B., and we're going to be talking about Step 11. And Step 11, when you read it, it reads as sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Can you help me out with this one, Angela?
Yeah, it is a difficult one when it's read from how it was written. But I don't think that most of us approach it that way. So, what was the way that you approached it or have thought of it, early on and stuff?
Well, okay. Now, when I was going through the steps with the sponsors through my old group, when we got to steps 10, 11, and 12, the maintenance steps, there wasn't really a lot of practical work that we did. All we did was read the material, get together, talk about it. And my sponsor at the time just urged me, he said, the best way to learn about these steps and to work these steps is to help someone else. Now, later, many years ago, this is now, but it was further into my sobriety, about 10 years into my sobriety, I got a little bit more serious with meditation. We started a meditation group, and I was meditating on a very regular basis and got a lot of benefit from it and learned a lot about it. And that was my step 11. It was never for me, even then, about making a conscious contact with God. And I don't know if I would talk to my sponsor about that necessarily. Although we did talk about prayer, but that was so long ago now that I don't quite remember it. But as I flash forward to many years later, and when I start looking at the steps again as an atheist, now I'm looking at what am I trying to achieve from the step. And initially, the conclusion I came to is that what I'm looking for is serenity, peace, calm. And I thought about the serenity prayer. So when I actually wrote this step out in my way, I just used the serenity prayer. So for me, this step is seeking the serenity to accept the things I can't change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. However, I get there, and that could be meditation. And actually, there was one point early on, even as an atheist, where, and I probably would still rely on this, reciting the serenity prayer, but not really thinking about it in terms as it being a prayer. But there are times when I might be agitated or nervous or worried or just feeling out of sorts. And reciting that in my brain does kind of help calm me down. And I think it does because of my past history of many years of using that prayer and saying it to myself still helps me. And so I will from time to time say it. I don't really think of it as petitioning to a God though, but I will do that. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. Now, another thing though that I did like about this step when I was first studying it early on, and it's something that I've carried with me, is the use of imagination in a constructive way, so that I can using imagination in meditation, so I can sit quietly and kind of use my brain to imagine myself someplace else, or imagining myself in a calm state or something like that. And I have done that before. So.
Okay. Well, interesting. And I think that yours is a pretty common experience for most people who are atheist or agnostic, looking at the steps and such, or who, went through them the first time. The way that I do it, I kind of consider this more of the continuing education step. And so, to me, it's not necessarily about prayer or, petitioning to God or creating a conscious contact with God, of course. But, part of that is the will for us and such. And so for me, it's more of just, continuing education, continuing to grow It's basically like taking what we did in steps 2 and 3, the way that, I understand them. So like the list of resources we developed in step 2 on things that, help us create calm, the resources that we go to that are healthy, whether it is meditation already or going for a walk or hanging out with our dog, that kind of thing. And then the intentionality of step 3, which is that, we're asserting that we want to continue to grow in this process, and putting them together and then just kind of amplifying that. So this step, I think, is more about openness and taking the new space we have in our life and in our brain from doing the previous step work, and then putting something good there, trying new things in life, since we're not hopefully ruminating as much, or, we've learned a little bit how to keep ourselves out of some dysfunction in work situations or relationship and stuff. What kind of stuff do we want to put in? And that's, the part of it where it's like developing ourselves more. What is my purpose? We can look at that a little bit more. Do I have a purpose, or is there, certain goals? I don't mean purpose as in, I was born to do this, but more of a, what do we feel like we can contribute? And so since we've done this previous work, this is a step that I think is about, learning about ourselves more and trying things that maybe we haven't tried. Even simple things like, if you were prone to go drinking in the woods, maybe you could actually try camping. Taking the curiosity, I think, of trying new things in different ways.
So if you had to put it in words, how would you word this if someone asked you to write it out?
If someone asked me to write it out, let's see. I guess I would say it would be something along the lines of, this step is more about continuing education, trying new things, so that we can recognize our potential.
Okay.
So yeah.
So this is really, and that makes sense to me, that you kind of get to the point where you've gone through all of the other steps. You've reached a point where you've probably grown a lot. You're already working on a lot of things, and this is just almost like a recommitment to challenge yourself to continue along with that process.
Yeah. So it's, continuing to grow. And usually you have more confidence, particularly after you've done, step 9 and gotten over some of the scary parts of, what other people might think or what the repercussions are going to be from that, and in step 10, you're, developing better practices and routines and things to keep yourself, more balanced emotionally. And so this is like taking all of that you've learned and being able to try stuff that maybe you wouldn't before. So like an example, my sponsor at one time was into ecstatic dance, which is like, it's, when she explained it to me, it sounded very wooey, which usually isn't my thing, but, I was willing to try it. And basically it's like, a bunch of people and they play, music, and everybody just kind of dances around to whatever way, moves them, or they feel like it. And, it's usually kind of, I guess I'd say hippie-ish type people. And so, just wasn't really something I thought that I would enjoy, but I decided that, I was going to try new things, and I'd never done that. And I was extremely uncomfortable. It was very, very, very difficult. I was super self-conscious, because of course, everybody's looking at me in my mind, it's all about, how I'm moving. But I tried it for a couple of months, because for me, it was more of an exercise of, okay, this is uncomfortable and probably not something that I'm going to want to do, but I want to do it enough times so that I'm okay with it, that I could do it, if I wanted to, and that the discomfort, the self-consciousness goes away. And that's what I did. And so I did it for a few months, and it got to be where I could, get in the flow and dance and do what I wanted. And it was kind of fun and stuff, but it just wasn't something that, I felt like I would do long term. And so I tried something out, and I gave it a real effort. I didn't shy away or didn't stop doing it just because I was uncomfortable. So that's part of the growth step for me, is that, yeah, it was a bit uncomfortable, but I stuck with it until I understood the discomfort and was able to move past that. And then I went on to the next thing that I decided to check out. And for me, some of the stuff I've mentioned before is like cooking, baking. I didn't know how to do any of that. And so starting to watch YouTube and learn different techniques and, all about butter and when you use butter and when you use margarine and when you use Crisco and, all sorts of crazy stuff like that. I didn't know anything about it. And so I started doing that and making cupcakes. And then I got into cookie decorating. And that's something that I find that I've cultivated and I've practiced a lot. So I'm not talented at it. I'm learned at it, but I'm good at it now. And I find that it's very meditative to me. The routine of I know the process, and I go and I bake the cookies, and this takes this long, and then I develop the icing, and I do the techniques, and I find just sitting down and doing that is a very meditative thing for me. I'm in the zone. I have to pay attention to what I'm doing. And so I'm right there, right now in the present, working on something. And so, again, I consider that as part of this step, because it's, trying something that, I didn't think I was good at, or I had very little skill at, that I might not have tried before, because particularly when I was in addiction, I didn't generally try new things unless they were extremely, dangerous and everybody else was doing it, and that kind of thing.
Like, I totally get it. I did
jump out of an airplane, but
yeah, I totally get it. Yeah, the light bulb just kind of went off, and I relate to you now so well about this. I actually did the same damn thing. I don't know if I ever connected this to my recovery necessarily, or to any particular step, but it makes sense. So for me, after I reached about 10 years of sobriety, that's really about when I was ready to move to the next level, I guess, and really begin exploring things like what you're talking about, activities beyond my normal recovery stuff. So at this point now, it took me this long. It took me about 10 years to get my life financially stable. That's just what it took for me. So at that time, that's when I started doing things like running, playing chess, doing fun things that I hadn't done before because of my drinking, or because I was just so busy trying to get my life together. And I was learning, I was doing things that, bike riding, different things that I just wasn't doing. And you're right. For me, they were very meditative. They took my mind off of any other kind of, worry or concern I might have. And at this point, I don't really have that many. I was kind of thinking today before I got on to talk with you, I thought, what do I do today to calm myself or whatever? But I don't really have situations so often anymore where I feel like I have to do anything to calm myself down. I just don't feel like things are going pretty smooth. I've been really lucky in that regard here lately, I guess. But but those things, and I just got back to running. Oh gosh, I haven't been good about it since my wife's surgery, but I was getting back into it, and I really do enjoy it, because it's that once I get into that groove, I don't know. I just kind of puts me in a different thought plane, I guess. And when I leave the gym after running, I always do it on a treadmill. I always just feel like uplifted, and I just feel better. And when I do that on a regular basis, it helps. But yeah, I started exploring things like that as well, and still do.
Right. And I like several things about it. One is that I think after working the steps, trying things and then deciding I don't like them wasn't as difficult as it was, if I did try it before, sometimes I'd feel like, guilt, like I have to keep going with this, even if I don't like it. It was easier for me to, give something a real effort and then determine and try something else if I didn't like it, or commit more, if it's something that I thought was good for me or that I could benefit from, or, help other people with and stuff. And so that was a little bit of a new thing for me, because again, I've spoken before in the steps of learning to have boundaries and say no, and all of that kind of stuff was a difficult thing for me. So this was another part of that where I got, some growth, is that, I got to try something like this ecstatic dance and then determined that I didn't want to be part of that, and not feel like, I was letting down the entire community or whatever else, we do, I think a lot of us, we can get a little carried away sometimes with this. So we, be mindful of that. Oftentimes, sometimes we'll take up running or things and then we injure ourselves because we push it too far because we get so excited about it. There was one woman in one of my meetings who talked about that, she was gonna get into fishing because she'd always, been going to the river and, with beer, and she called that fishing. And so to get into fishing, instead of just getting, a fishing pole and tackle box and stuff, she got, several fishing poles and a boat and, and like went, totally overboard. And I can relate to that too. One of the things that I tried was, hula hooping. All of my friends, it felt like, could hula hoop, and I couldn't hula hoop. And so I learned how to hula hoop, and then I learned how to make hula hoops, and then I started selling hula hoops. And,
oh my God.
And it's just like, yeah, it's like, really going for it. And so starting to learn a little bit of balance with that.
Oh, wow, Angela, again, you're just like
I think
me.
This is, yeah,
I can tell you a story about just something just like that. I got into coin collecting, okay? And because I coin collected as a kid. Well, the next thing you know, I'm selling coins on eBay, buying coins on eBay. And then next thing you know, I've got a damn website, numismaticsupplies.com, and I'm buying coin collecting supplies wholesale, and trying to sell them retail. And I'm going to coin shows all over the Midwest trying to sell this crap. Oh my God. It became like a full-time job, and I wasn't making any money at it because it's like these coin collecting supplies are dirt cheap. I mean, it's like you have to sell boxes and boxes of the crap. I mean, we're talking about little things that you hold coins in. Oh my God. So anyway, my basement to this day is full of coin collecting supplies, and it drives my wife crazy. What she does now, because she was on my ass for a long time, saying, you got to do something about this basement. Well, I'm bad about it. I just never did. Anyway, what she's doing now, she just grabs a few boxes of this stuff at a time, and she takes it to this coin dealer and sells it to him.
Nice.
But yeah, I did that. I mean, I got totally out of hand. Why couldn't I just collect the damn coins and not have a big business and website?
Right.
Yeah. So you can get carried away. You got to be real careful.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes practice, and probably if we worked on the meditation part, maybe we'd get that quicker. But I don't know, But yeah, there's that. I tried beading, making necklaces and stuff. So I got all of this beading supplies, and that's not cheap. And then I determined that really, I didn't like beading. I liked, playing with the beads. I like touching the beads, the tactile stuff, but, I really don't like to bead. So, I held on to the stuff for a while, and then eventually I'm like, you really, don't like to bead. You should give it to people who, would benefit more. And so, I did that, but I tried it out. And so, I tried that as a new thing. And then exploration, academically, looking into new things, reading books and studying. And a lot of us, I think, can get into that. And particularly those of us that are secular and trying to make our way, in recovery, particularly in 12-step meetings, I think a lot of us really get into reading and exploring. And so, yeah, I think that's helpful as well, to expand, our ideas, both of of addiction or substance use or whatever, whatever you want to call it, and being aware of all of the different information out there so that we are, making good decisions about ourselves and changing our language if that's what works for us or what would work better for us, so it's, continuing to grow basically.
Yeah, and
That's
it's
how I
really
think of
putting
it.
yourself outside into the world, outside of AA, outside of recovery, but you're interacting with all kinds of people in the real world doing things, that aren't necessarily related to, recovery per se, but it's getting you out there and meeting these people and expanding your horizons. All of this stuff happened to me after that 10-year mark. That's when I went back to school and this was happening. I started reading more. I still enjoy reading, and anyway, now all of this stuff I incorporate into AA Beyond Belief, the website, and all that kind of stuff. And I have to kind of watch that too because I can get carried away. Like nowadays, if I read a book, I feel like I have to write a book review and post it on AA Beyond Belief, and I stress myself out over it because it's like, I have a hard time writing these damn book reviews. They're hard to write. So I'm telling myself, like, I just given up on the last 2 books I've read about writing reviews. I said, you know what, damn it. I read the book. I liked the book. I don't know what to tell anyone about it. I liked it. That's it. I just got to move on.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Well, and there's lots of ways you can share it too, so sharing it in the online communities or, in podcasts like this, we've talked about a couple of different books that are helpful and in different things. I really am enjoying it this time. Well, enjoying sounds really strange when you're talking about trauma, but it's an interest of mine in understanding trauma, developmental trauma, and how that, affects people's lives, and particularly those of us who start using substances. I find it fascinating. So, I've read like 5 books on trauma, and so I can talk about them, in these podcasts or with other people in groups, and share my information, that I've learned that way. And so, yeah, so that's something that I find really interesting.
And I think
and
that's
that I'm
totally on
pursuing
board
right
with
now.
step 11 too, because when you're doing
Yeah.
that, I mean, you're in a place where you're reading, you're comprehending, you're calm, you're happy. Why is that, any different from meditating? I just don't, I just think that that's a really, for me, reading is a very relaxing activity. And it's something where, when you're reading a book, you stop and you kind of think about it along the way. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, that's just a wonderful way to kind of get myself kind of chilled out, and, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's how I always see these things. I always try to look at the steps in a practical way as far as what am I getting out of it? What do I really want to get out of it? And when you think about step 11, for me, it's always been, it says, and I'm sorry, I always have to go back to the original, and it's stupid that I even have to, but when it talks about, maybe I shouldn't even. What does this mean? This really is nonsense. I'm sorry. Now, the more I read it, sought through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious. Okay, so I guess what I would when I was looking at this years ago, I'd say my conscious contact with God. That doesn't really mean anything to me as an atheist, other than I'm assuming that people who have a conscious contact with God, they must feel like a peaceful connection. So I'm assuming that, okay, so I have peaceful connections myself, but it's not through it's not through God. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well,
Oh
yeah,
boy.
I'd say like the inner peace with
Yeah.
yourself. So improve your inner peace, your self-knowledge, your acceptance of self, for that part of the step. And then, yeah, for me, I think the rest is learning to explore and develop, what that self is. What is your potential? So, it's kind of like an openness, creating a connection to life, which, is outside of AA. It's both in, usually in the steps we're in when we're getting sober. It often is a major part of our life. And then I think this takes what we've learned and starts to apply it outside. So making a connection to life, and exploring, additional resources and maybe letting the inner child out to explore things that maybe we, didn't before, or if we've had biases that we grew up with, I was thinking of like gender ideals or things that we had, like, men are supposed to be a certain way or women are supposed to be a certain way, and learning, is that what I want to be part of my life, realizing that I have choices on how I can do things, and exploring those until you come to a place of, oh, this is how I think I'd like to be, and this is how I'd like to grow. So it's just really bringing all of that together, using mindful inquiry, if I can speak today, and and being intentional or aware of, that we have potential. A lot of us, I think, for a long time, suffered, self-esteem issues, or, we did do, crappy things, and learning to come to terms with that. And then, this, I think, is getting to the point of, wait, regardless of my past, I have potential, and let's explore that. Let's see what this is.
So if you're sponsoring somebody and you get to the step, do you actually have them do anything concrete, any actual action? Again, like I said, my sponsor, when I was doing this, no, we didn't really do anything other than later, I kind of did some things that I associate with step 11.
Yeah. Well, for this, we talk a little bit about what I've talked about thus far. And then sometimes if there's, if the person isn't quite sure, we'll make a list that they can do at the end of the day to think about. So we do things like think about, did I do something today for my mind? What did I do today for my body, for my relationships? How did I foster creativity? Or, am I looking at passions I might have, interests? That kind of thing, so that it gets you thinking about stuff outside of the basics of today, of if I'm just being a nice person and not drinking, so what other things are going on that that help develop myself, so that I can be more helpful in the future, and enjoy life more. So that's kind of what we do with that, is we think about those things, and start to explore that. So, I have them take time to think about it, and to start trying, a new activity or a new discipline, a new practice of some sort, and see how that goes. And so, we do that for, it depends on the person, but sometimes a month or so, and try different things and see how it feels, and how it feels to, how do you make the determine that something is your interest or not? If it makes you feel uncomfortable the minute you do it, it's like, how does that work? And so we talk about that. And then once they get used to that, then we can, move on to step 12. But it's just the, taking 2 and 3 and kind of, applying it to the larger scale, and realizing that we have that potential. Sometimes I think people get stuck in recovery, and and they do good things in recovery. They get into service, and they are better people, but they sometimes get stuck in that. That's all that they feel like they can do. That's all they feel they're successful at, is being a person in recovery, which, for some people, maybe that is the best thing for them, is being a person in recovery. But for me, I felt like this step is, taking what I've learned, and the tools I've gathered, and the self-esteem that I've gathered, and stepping out into the world and trying it in different places. And sometimes it works well in different places, and sometimes it doesn't. It really, depends on what you're doing and what your interests are. So, that's kind of how I work with it when I'm working with somebody, and
well, I really
doing
like your
step
take
11.
on it. I like it because you get away from meditation. And that's such a hang up for a lot of people, because meditation is not something that a lot of people like to do. It's just, I can see that there are definitely benefits from it. And I think that if people like to meditate, they definitely should. But there are other ways of achieving the same goal, I think, that aren't necessarily sitting in a chair, quietly or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I think it's the idea, the preconceived idea of what meditation is, that is difficult for a lot of people. Because like we said, there's a lot of ways that you can experience that, like is it the Tibetan monks that do the sand mandalas, where they spend lots and lots of time, doing this beautiful thing and then wipe it away? That takes a lot of, intent and time and concentration, and it benefits them. So they're still getting, the benefit. They're just not, sitting there doing it, contemplating life. I mean, maybe they are, but that's not how it appears from my understanding. And part of my coming to, understand this step this way was, attempting meditation. And I think it was probably more along when I was in step 2. I went to like a mind sangha type thing to try to do, understand group meditation. And I just could not get it. I couldn't stop my mind long enough to get anywhere. And so it was pretty miserable for me. I'd sit in there and my butt would hurt. And then I'd try, we'd walk around and I'd try to do the walking thing, but I was busy concentrating on not, stepping on the person in front of me. And, and so most of those things didn't help. I do use guided meditation sometimes, but, when I'm doing guided meditation, it's generally for, calming myself. It's one of my resources for helping getting myself out of like a mental spiral or, some sort of thing like that. And so, I find those useful because it is somebody, talking and guiding me through, thinking about either different parts of my body or, relating to different things. So it's still more of a mental exercise than what I think most people consider meditation to be. You're supposed to get outside of your thoughts or whatever, and for me, I've been outside of my thoughts, and I've had the skill of disassociation, and so I need to be more into into my thoughts, not in a ruminating way, but into the acceptance way, understanding what they are, figuring things out. I was thinking about that last night, that I've heard in a couple of different meetings over the last 13 years that this isn't figure it out anonymous, and I'm like, what a strange thing to say. It's so weird to me. And it's usually by people who are like, you have to do the steps this way and everything's by the book and blah, blah, blah. It's not figure it out. And I'm like, well, actually, I think it kind of is, at least for me. Learning how to do it in a productive, introspective, caring, and compassionate way. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Well, I think that we did a pretty good job on step 11, actually. When you I hope that people, like what we had to say. I mean, I think that there are going to be some people that are going to think that we are poo-pooing meditation too much, but that's okay. I mean, it's just not for everybody. Some people are really into it, and that's great. It's just like, but some people aren't, and that's okay too. There are other things you can do, and you and I have found other ways besides meditation to achieve what we want out of this. So I think that's great.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it'd just be like, the people who are saying that we poo-poo prayer.
Right.
It's like, well, yeah, we do.
Yeah, we do actually.
So that's, well, whereas in my home group, there are people that are agnostic that use prayer, and they're like, I don't actually pray to anything. It's just an exercise I use to understand what my desires or my thoughts are, or to, to kind of understand where I'm at the moment. And so they use, and they, I'm like, well, isn't that more of an affirmation? Or, I want to phrase it in a way that makes sense to me, but to them, it works perfectly fine as prayer. And so if that works for you, that's great. If meditation in a traditional sense works for you, then I think that's great too. That most of this is finding stuff that works for each individual. And that's why we're putting these podcasts out there to say, hey, this is, what I do, or, what somebody I know does, and this is how it helps them. And, maybe it'll help you too. And if not, there's lots of other things. And so, yeah.
So when we get to step 12, you want to do it live?
Well, I thought it'd be interesting to do it live, to try it out. Because like with this one, we don't have as much material as, 4 and 5. And so with step 12, we'll probably talk a little bit about, being of service, how you put all the stuff together to be of service to people. And so, yeah, I figured maybe 20 minutes to half an hour, and then open it up to people to call in and either share, their thoughts on step 12, or on, what we've talked about in the steps, thus far. Or even, are there things that they think that should be covered more, or that they, would like to hear more about, or think that we should check out.
I think it's a great idea.
Thing.
I think I've ironed out the bugs. The first live one that we did, the phone calls were off. They didn't sound too good, but I think that was because something on my end. I think that I had a web page open that was playing the YouTube as I was recording it at the same time. I think that I was doing something like that. I don't know, but I'm going to be. I tested it a few times with my wife, and it seemed to work okay. So I think I might have figured that out. I think it was just kind of a fluky thing that I happened to do that particular night, because I remember I was kind of not sure if I was actually streaming. So I went on YouTube and I opened it up so I could actually see myself, see that yes, I am on YouTube. There I am. But I think I left that window open, and it was kind of messing up the audio.
Yeah.
So,
well, we can practice it.
Yeah, we'll practice it. And then
figure it out, podcasting.
Yeah. It will work. It will work. And I think that we can actually connect like we are now through Zencastr, and then play it on streaming through YouTube. And that's what we'll have to practice. So anyway, that's some geeky stuff that everybody doesn't need to have to hear, I guess. But yeah, we'll figure it out.
Unless it's part of their step 11 is to do a podcast.
Right.
And so they want to hear the geeky stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Okay.
We'll definitely do that then. That sounds great.
Okay,
so,
sounds good.
Anything else you want to talk about? You want to cover before we head on out?
Nope, I think that's about it for today.
Yeah, I think I've got it too. So it was nice chatting with you, and I do look forward to going through step 12. And tomorrow, by the way, I will be posting step 10 on AA Beyond Belief. So that will be out tomorrow. Actually, tomorrow doesn't mean anybody who's listening to this now, but anyway. All right, you take care, Angela.
You too.
And that's another episode of AA Beyond Belief. Thank you so much for listening. If you would like to help out our site and podcast, there's a couple of things you can do. First of all, go over to iTunes and leave us a review, hopefully a favorable one. You can also help out financially with either a recurring or one-time contribution. You can do that by setting up small recurring donations at our Patreon page at patreon.com/AABeyondBelief, or through PayPal at paypal.me/AABeyondBelief. And you can always visit our site, aabeyondbelief.org, and click on the donate button. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back again real soon with another episode of AA Beyond Belief, the podcast.